I think happiness is a state of fundamental well-being in your core, around which other feelings can come and go. Like you could be irritated about something or frustrated or worried about something, while deep in your core, you could have this fundamental sense of well-being. And I think of that basic sense of well-being as having two components to it. Classically, hedonia, a sense of life being enjoyable, grateful, pleasurable, rewarding, and eudaimonia, a sense of life being fulfilling, meaningful, you're making a contribution, you're really glad you're here. There really is a distinction between that feeling we have when we're grateful or we see a flower, it's beautiful, we're listening to some music, we're jamming with it, it feels great, we're happy, it's all good. That's different from waking up in the middle of the night to get your crying 10-month-old baby for the third time that night at 3 in the morning. You're not jumping up and down with joy that you've got to get out of bed to do it, but deep in your bones, it's deeply fulfilling and rewarding. I also think about people who do social justice work, like Doctors Without Borders, stuff like that. There you are in a refugee camp, you're working 14-hour days, you're exhausted, you're not comfortable in your situation, and still, it's deeply fulfilling. That's more the eudaimonia territory. Now, the two go together because many moments of ordinary enjoyment and pleasure, satisfaction, friendship, connection, accomplishment, gratitude, joy, many of those ordinary moments of hedonia build up an internal sense of life being fulfilling and rewarding. So there's a relationship between the two. It feels good to accomplish a goal. That's because it's good for us to accomplish goals. It feels good to be connected to other people. It's because it's good for animals in the wild for survival, and certainly humans to connect with other people. It feels good to be safe, to realize that you're protected, or to notice, oof, in this moment I'm actually all right. So the enjoyability of an experience, which is like a taste of happiness in a sense, the enjoyability of an experience is usually a marker that it's good for us. These many moments of ordinary well-being, enjoyment, and pleasure are instant stress relief, so they antidote the noxious, pernicious, long-term effects of stress. And also, these many moments of pleasure and enjoyment tend to bind us to other people and strengthen bonds of relationship and connection with the individual level, the family level, community level, even the national level. At this point, the research basis for the physical health benefits of happiness, both state and trade, and the research basis for the benefits of happiness for mental health and relationship health is so great that if the pharmaceutical companies could patent happiness for its known research-proven health benefits, we would be seeing ads for happiness every night on television, at least in America, where we have ads for pharmaceuticals. I find for myself that, that there really, in a way, are like three, I'd say, major aspects of happiness. And I say this informally, One is the dimension of enjoyability. They're just kind of, you're like enjoying. You look out, oh, life's pretty, or oh, like my buddies, I'm having fun with them. There's your cat is crawling into your lap. Life's enjoyable, right? There's pleasure in life. Second is around love and contribution. That you feel connected to others, and you feel like you can offer your gifts to other people, and to some significant, sufficient extent, they are received by other people. So the dimension of enjoyability and love. And then the last one, a quality of inner peace. I think that if people deep in their bones are restless or uneasy in life, or there is inside them a fundamental discontent, it's hard to be truly happy even if you have an enjoyable life and you have a lot of fulfilling relationships with others. And I think that's often the case for people who are typically fortunate enough to be able to have a very enjoyable life, and they're good in their relationships, but they lack inner peace. And the other thing I would point out is that with inner peace, even if your life isn't very enjoyable, right, And even if you're limited in your capacities to relate to other people, maybe you've been put in jail, or I've been reading recently about Tibet, many people there who are, due to the invasions of the Chinese government and so forth, who are separated from their families, their religious traditions, their whole culture, so they don't have much opportunity for that loving connection, but there still is a deep sense of inner peace. So I guess if I were to say my own personal amateur theory here, that I think happiness really does boil down to these three dimensions, enjoyability, full relationships, and inner peace. But of the three, inner peace is the most fundamental. Our resting state, biologically, as human animals, is mild well-being. That's our fundamental resting state. So arguably, in my view at least, our resting state is happiness. And then we have more or less intensifications of that, and we also have different nuances or tones. There's the happiness of just looking at the stars one night, and then there's the happiness of your sports team making it to the next level of the playoffs. Go the Golden State Warriors, my favorite local basketball team. So but the problem is we're so easily disturbed from our home base. We're pushed out from our home base very quickly with any sense of threat or frustration or a relationship issue. And that leaving of that home base can become a kind of chronic inner homelessness that becomes the new normal, and we forget what our true natural condition is a fundamental, basic sense of well-being. The interesting question, in a funny way, to reverse it, is not so much how can we get to happiness? It's more, how can we stop banging ourselves in the foot, disturbing ourselves from the natural happiness that is our birthright? How do we find that sweet spot, which I think is so relevant to modern industrial, civilizations? How do we find that sweet spot where we are sustaining our own internal sense of contentment and peace and fulfillment and worth and love, while also dreaming big dreams, aiming for those stars, swinging for the fences in the American baseball metaphor? That's the sweet spot. And I've really reflected on that one a lot. And I think there's certain things that characterize it. One is positive emotion, because if you're going to rev up, involving a lot of activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, but you're using it to a good end, right? If you're going to rev up, make sure you're paying attention to the positive emotions, because it's very easy for that intensity to flip into irritability or anxiety. So positive emotion. Second, don't get attached to the outcome. As soon as you get attached in a sense of driven or insistence, I gotta have it, your happiness is going to get squeezed out like water out of a rag that you're wringing out. And it may serve you short term to get attached and driven to the goal, but long term it's going to wear you down and gradually erode your own foundation of happiness. I find that in many ways the people who really accomplish the most in life would describe this funny kind of dual experience where simultaneously they're passionately, enthusiastically, fiercely sometimes, going for something. I can think about my own experiences often like rock climbing or aiming to the top of a mountain, or being really serious about pulling something off in business, etc., or getting through to someone. There's a fierceness to it, and simultaneously there's a knowing that all you can do is make your own sincere and skillful efforts, and the outcome is mainly out of your own hands. What if a person has had bad stuff happen to them, trauma? Or what if they're currently in traumatic situations? Can they gradually, find a way to feel a fundamental sense of contentment and meaning in their life? Different ways of talking about happiness. And there I would say, absolutely. It's a huge question, the how of doing that, the how of recovery from trauma, or the how of coping with traumatic circumstances if you're in the middle of them. But the bottom line point for me is that there are countless examples of people who've done that. And there's at this point a tremendous amount of good research and good practical interventions helping people who've gone through that kind of thing. My old school take on all that is that you have to do the work.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people think that they understand that if they want to learn how to drive a truck, they have to do the work, or you have to learn how to make a margarita. You have to do the work, right? But often people don't realize that to do the work of recovering from trauma or becoming happy in an often unhappy world, you have to do the work. But if you're willing to do the work, you will reap the rewards of your efforts. Part of that practice often includes really facing and telling the truth about the crap that landed on your head.
Yeah.
Really, you know, for every one person I've known, maybe you have different ratios in the UK, I don't know, but at least in the States, for every person I've known who was a whiner, quote unquote, who moaning and groaning, self-pity, blah, 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 whatever caricature you might imagine of that person, I've met 10 or 100 people who understated, denied, even to themselves, the magnitude of what happened to them and the magnitude of its impacts upon them. And so step one, really, in coming through, step one of the path to happiness is really coming to terms with how bad it was, what really happened, and owning it, acknowledging it, and having compassion for yourself. If you don't honor what really happened to you and have warm, tender feelings of compassion and friendship for yourself, your efforts toward happiness are going to be really limited. The first step is to get on your own side. It's that existential stance where you basically say, I'm going to be for myself. Doesn't mean I'm against others. We all know what it feels like to be for somebody, right? We have a friend who got mistreated or bullied, or you're in a situation, people are hassling your friend, you stick up for your friend. Or maybe there's some kid, and you're like, whoa, that's not right, you know? We know what it's like to be for something, or for some cause, like anti-apartheid, or what have you. We're for something. We know what that's like. Well, what's the feeling of being for yourself? To take your own suffering seriously and to have this fundamental sense of, I'm going to be an ally to myself rather than an adversary to myself. Many, many people are adversaries to themselves or self-doubters, naysayers. They rain on their own parade. They rain on their own dreams. And there's a fundamental shift where someone says, this sucks, this hurts, I'm in the pit. I might have put myself in the pit, partly or entirely. Okay, big breath. Every moment is a new moment going forward. Whew. All right, I'm going to be for myself. I'm going to try to help myself get out of here. That's for me always the very first step. And it's for many people, it's a critical first step that hasn't yet happened. They're kind of inert in their own suffering. They're sizzling on the hot plate of life going, wow, this really hurts. But they're not for themselves to push the switch to turn off the electricity to the hot plate or get off the hot plate or to call for help. Happiness is caused by things. What are the causes of happiness? And obviously people have different genetic settings in terms of mood and stuff like that. But beyond that, there's a lot you can do. And the hedonic treadmill, so-called, is relevant in some cases, but for many people it's not actually relevant. They change their happiness set point over time. And they certainly change it in particular settings that they're in. They're no longer unhappy in those settings. That's a huge change of your set point, you know, and they even become fairly happy in those settings. But the way to do that is through learning, through this emotional learning process of repeatedly internalizing positive, beneficial experiences, which are usually enjoyable, so that they really sink in and, you know, brick by brick, build up your own personal foundation for happiness. Existentially, no one can get on your own side except you. And as Rabbi Hillel, I think, wrote a long time ago, if you are not for yourself, who will be? And if not now, when?
Hombre, me que vemos un metro y yo se lo voy a